Emma stepped out of her car and took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. She looked up at the towering oak trees that lined the street, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. As she walked towards the house where her interview was to take place, she felt a strange tingling sensation spread through her body, as if she was being watched. Suddenly, she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me, miss." Emma turned around, her heart racing. Standing before her was a man who seemed to exude confidence and charm. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a lean, athletic build. His eyes were a piercing shade of blue that seemed to penetrate deep into her soul. His tousled brown hair fell gently onto his forehead, giving him an irresistibly boyish appeal. "Yes?" she managed to utter, her voice cracking slightly under the weight of his gaze. "I couldn't help but notice you," he said, taking a step closer. "You're absolutely stunning." Emma blushed, feeling both flattered and slightly uncomfortable. She glanced down at her clothes, wondering if they made her look too plain or frumpy. "Thanks," she managed to say, trying to sound confident. He smiled, revealing a set of perfectly straight white teeth. "I'm Mark," he said. Their eyes locked for a moment before he held out his hand for her to shake. As their hands touched, Emma felt a jolt of electricity run through her body. It was as if she had known him all her life. She couldn't help but notice the way his hand lingered on hers, just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "So," he said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them, "what brings you here?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies that were fluttering wildly in her stomach. "I'm here for a job interview," she replied, her voice sounding strange in her own ears. Mark's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A job interview," he repeated, his tone incredulous. "Well, I can tell you right now that you're going to nail it." Emma laughed nervously, feeling her cheeks flush again. "Thanks, Mark. That's a vote of confidence." He grinned, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "I'm always right about these things," he said, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine at his touch. As they walked towards the house together, Emma couldn't help but feel drawn to Mark. There was something about him that was irresistible, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. They chatted easily about everything and nothing, their conversation flowing like a gentle river. When they reached the front door, Mark turned to face her, his eyes filled with an intensity that made Emma's heart race. He said softly, "What are you doing after your interview? Do you want to meet up for a drink?" "Okay," said Emma, intrigued by his forwardness. "By the way, my name is Emma." They made the arrangement, and after Emma's interview they did indeed meet at a local bar. They hit it off straight away, and before she had time to think, Emma found herself dizzy with desire. She had never experienced anything like this before, not even in her wildest dreams. "I don't know what it is about you, Mark," she murmured, "but I can't stop thinking about you." Mark smiled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "I think that's because you're supposed to be thinking about me," he said teasingly. "After all, we are destined to be together." Emma giggled, feeling the butterflies in her stomach take flight once again. "You really are something else, Mark," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're like no one I've ever met before." Mark leaned in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "That's because I'm not like anyone else, Emma," he whispered, his voice sending shivers down her spine. "I'm the one who's going to make all your dreams come true." Emma felt herself melting into his embrace, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. She knew she should be cautious, but something about Mark made her feel safe and protected, as if she could trust him with anything. Later on that night, they decided to carry on the fun. They walked inside his house together, their hands still entwined. As they made their way towards the living room, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was in over her head. Mark seemed like a charming and confident man, but there was something about him that made her feel uneasy. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was an air of danger surrounding him that sent shivers down her spine. Emma found herself distracted by his every move. As the evening wore on, she began to wonder if she had made a mistake by coming here, so made an excuse to get back to her house. The next day, Emma woke up with a start, her heart racing. She couldn't get Mark out of her mind. She tried to convince herself that it was just a harmless flirtation, but deep down, she knew better. She felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. As she got ready for work, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her stomach. She wondered if she had made a mistake by going to Mark's house last night. But as she drove to the office, she reminded herself she needed to focus on the task at hand. Upon arriving at the office, she tried to put her thoughts about Mark behind her and concentrate on the work ahead. However, every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face flash before her. She couldn't understand why he kept invading her thoughts. Later that day, Emma met up with her friend Sarah for lunch. Excitedly, she told her about the interview and how it had gone. She also shared that she had met Mark, and after the interview they had met up. Emma explained how he seemed to understand her on a deeper level. Sarah listened intently, nodding her head in understanding. "You know, Emma," Sarah said, her brow furrowed in concern, "I think you need to be careful with Mark. There's something about him that's not quite right. He seems a bit intense." Emma brushed her friend's worries aside, feeling a pang of guilt at her own attraction to Mark. "I know, Sarah, but he's just so charismatic and charming. I can't help but be drawn to him." Over the next few weeks, Emma found herself thinking about Mark constantly. Their interactions after the interview had ignited a spark between them, and despite Sarah's warnings, she couldn't help but feel a sense of longing whenever she thought about him. They began to exchange emails and texts, discussing everything from work to their favorite movies and food. Their conversations were always flirtatious and playful, leaving Emma with butterflies in her stomach continuously. One evening, after work, Mark invited Emma out for dinner. She hesitated at first but eventually agreed, feeling drawn to him despite her better judgment. As they sat across from each other at a cozy Italian restaurant, their eyes locked, and Emma felt a wave of desire wash over her. Mark was charming and attentive, listening intently to everything she had to say. They shared several bottles of wine and ended up dancing cheek to cheek in the middle of the empty restaurant. The next morning, Emma woke up feeling guilty, but also strangely exhilarated. She couldn't shake the memory of their passionate encounter and found herself fantasizing about him throughout the day. Despite Sarah's warnings, she couldn't help but feel drawn to Mark's magnetic personality. Their relationship quickly escalated, and before she knew it, they were spending every spare moment together. Mark showered Emma with gifts and compliments, making her feel like the most special woman in the world. He seemed to understand her like no one else, and she found herself confiding in him about her deepest fears and desires. They shared intimate moments that left her breathless, but there was something about him that still made her uneasy. One night, after a particularly intense encounter, Emma woke up to find Mark staring at her intently. His eyes were filled with a strange intensity that made her skin crawl. She tried to ignore the feeling and focus on his touch, but it was no use. Something about him felt off, and she couldn't shake the feeling. The next morning, Emma woke up with a start, her heart racing. She knew she had to talk to Sarah about her feelings. As they met for coffee, Emma poured her heart out, describing the intense connection she felt with Mark, but also the unease that had been growing inside her. Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed in concern. "I think you need to be careful, Emma," Sarah said, her voice low and serious. "Mark is a charismatic guy, but there's something off about him. He's too intense, too focused on you. It almost feels like he's trying to control you. He is a bit intense." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. "I'm glad you see it now," she said, her expression serious. "You need to be careful, Emma. This could be more than just a harmless flirtation." Emma nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She knew Sarah was right, but she also felt a sense of loss. She had genuinely believed that Mark was the one for her, that he understood her like no one else. It was a hard pill to swallow. As they finished their coffee, Emma decided to take a step back from Mark. She needed some time to process her feelings and figure out what she really wanted. She knew Sarah would be there for her, no matter what. Over the next few days, Emma tried to focus on work and spending time with Sarah. She found herself thinking about Mark constantly, but she forced herself to take a break from their intense relationship. She needed some space to breathe and think clearly. One afternoon, as they were grabbing coffee, Sarah brought up the topic of Mark again. "So, have you heard from him?" she asked, her voice cautious. Emma shook her head, feeling a knot form in her stomach. "No, not yet. Why?" Sarah took a sip of her coffee before answering. "Well, I was just wondering how things were going with him. You seemed really into him before." Emma shrugged, feeling a mix of emotions. "I know, I was. But I think I need some space from him right now." Sarah nodded, understanding. "That's smart. You need to do what's best for you." Emma sighed, feeling a pang of guilt. "I just hope I'm not leading him on. He seems really into me and I don't want to hurt him." Sarah put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, Emma. You need to take care of yourself first, and if Mark is really into you, he'll understand." As the days passed, she found herself thinking about Mark less and less, which was both a relief and a source of sadness. She missed the intense connection they had shared. One evening, while browsing through her social media feed, Emma stumbled upon a picture of Mark with another woman. The woman was beautiful, and they looked extremely close. Emma's heart sank as she realized that Mark had moved on so quickly. She felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and betrayal. Emma decided to confront Mark about the situation. She composed a message, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. After several minutes of deliberation, she hit send. Mark replied almost immediately, apologizing profusely and explaining that he thought she had lost interest in him. They arranged to meet for coffee the following day to talk things through. As Emma waited for Mark to arrive, she tried to calm her racing thoughts. She wasn't sure if she could forgive him for moving on so quickly, but she wanted to hear his side of the story. When he finally walked through the door, she could feel the tension in the air. They ordered their drinks in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "I saw the picture on social media," Emma said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand how you could move on so quickly." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emma, I'm sorry. I thought you had lost interest in me. You stopped responding to my messages, and when I tried to call you, you didn't pick up." Emma shook her head, feeling a mixture of anger and hurt. "I was just trying to figure things out, Mark. I needed some space." Mark sighed, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I understand that now, Emma. I just thought you had lost interest." Emma pulled her hand away, feeling a stab of pain. "It's just that," she started, searching for the words. "I thought we had something special. I was just trying to figure things out." Mark studied her face for a moment, his expression pained. "I understand that, Emma. I really do. But it's hard when someone you care about seems to disappear without explanation." He reached across the table and took her hand again. "I'm sorry for pushing you away, for not giving you the space you needed." Emma felt her heart twinge at his words. She had never expected Mark to be so understanding, so vulnerable. As she looked into his eyes, she could see the sincerity in them, the depth of his feelings. "I'm sorry too, Mark," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you." They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. Then, suddenly, Mark leaned forward, his eyes bright with determination. "I think we should give this another chance, Emma. I realize now that I made a mistake, and I was wrong to push you away. I want to prove to you that my feelings for you are real, that I can be the man you deserve." Emma looked into Mark's eyes, feeling a stirring of emotions she thought she had lost. She knew he was sincere, that he truly cared for her. She couldn't deny the intense connection they had shared, or the way his touch made her feel alive. "Okay, Mark," she said finally, her voice trembling with emotion. "Let's give it another go. But we need to take it slow, understand each other better. I don't want either of us to get hurt again." Mark nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I agree, Emma. We'll take it slow, one step at a time. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work." As they walked out of the coffee shop, hand in hand, Emma felt a sense of hope and excitement bubbling within her. She knew that she couldn't imagine her life without Mark. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Mark took things slow, spending time getting to know each other better than ever before. They went on long walks, had deep conversations, and shared intimate moments that strengthened their connection. One night, as they lay in bed together, Mark confessed something that surprised Emma. He admitted that he had been hurt in a previous relationship and had sworn off love, but Emma had changed his mind that day at the house, when they first met. She had shown him that love could be worth the risk, and he wanted to give her his whole heart. Emma felt a mixture of joy and trepidation at his words. She knew that love wasn't always easy, and she didn't want to get hurt again. But she also couldn't deny the intense connection she felt with Mark. She took a deep breath and decided to trust him, to give their relationship a real chance. Over the next few months, Emma and Mark's love deepened. They faced challenges together, from financial struggles to family issues, but they always emerged stronger. Their connection was like a flame that burned brighter with each passing day. They shared intimate moments that left them both breathless, and they supported each other through the tough times. One day, as they were walking in the park, Mark dropped to one knee and proposed. Emma was taken aback, but her heart swelled with love and happiness. "Emma, you are my everything," he said, taking her hand in his. "You've shown me that love is worth the risk, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes as she nodded her head. Yes. They embraced each other tightly, their hearts beating as one. They planned their wedding day, promising to cherish each other forever. Over the next few months, Emma and Mark's love only grew stronger. They became inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and always knowing what the other was thinking. They moved in together, creating a beautiful home filled with love and laughter. One day, as they were sitting on the couch watching their favorite TV show, Mark leaned over and kissed Emma passionately. She melted into his embrace, their hearts beating as one. They made love that night like never before, their connection even deeper than ever before. Over time, their love grew stronger, and they decided to start a family. They were overjoyed when they found out that Emma was pregnant. They spent their days cuddling, watching movies, and planning for their future. They knew that their love would last forever, no matter what challenges came their way. One day, as they were walking hand in hand through the park, they noticed a couple arguing nearby. Without thinking, they rushed over to see if they could help. The couple, friends of theirs, had been going through a tough time. Emma and Mark listened to their problems and offered them advice. Their friends were grateful for their help and thanked them for being there when they needed it the most. As they walked away from the park, Emma and Mark felt a sense of satisfaction. They had helped their friends and felt like they had made a difference in their lives. They continued walking, holding hands, feeling closer than ever before. They decided to stop at a nearby cafe for coffee and dessert. The cafe was cozy, with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. They found a table by the window and ordered their drinks. As they sipped their coffee, they looked out at the busy street, lost in their own thoughts. "I can't believe we're going to be parents," Emma said, her eyes shining with excitement. Mark squeezed her hand, his face filled with joy. "I know, we're going to make great parents." They finished their dessert and stepped out into the chilly night air. As they walked home, they held each other close, lost in their own thoughts. They were both nervous and excited about the upcoming birth of their child, but they knew that they would always be there for each other. The next day, Emma woke up early to prepare for her first day of work at the new job. She had felt a strong connection with the company during her interview, and she was excited to start her new career. As she got ready, she couldn't help but think about her conversation with Mark the night before. They had talked about their future, about the challenges they would face, but also about the love they shared. As she drove to work, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She was determined to make a good impression on her new colleagues and to work hard to prove herself. As she arrived at the office, she was greeted by her friendly boss and introduced to her new team members. During her lunch break, she decided to take a walk around the city. As she strolled through the bustling streets, she couldn't help but think about her conversation with Mark the night before. She felt a warm glow inside, remembering the way he had looked at her, the way he had touched her. She knew that she was falling in love with him, more deeply and irrevocably than anyone ever before. As she returned to the office, she felt a sense of purpose and determination. She was ready to take on whatever challenges came her way, knowing that she had someone to lean on, someone who loved her unconditionally. She was so grateful for the support of her new colleagues and her boss, who had welcomed her with open arms. That night, as she and Mark snuggled on the couch watching their favorite show on the television, she couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. They had made it through another day, and they had each other. Their love was like a beacon in the darkness, guiding them through the ups and downs of life. In the morning, Emma woke up early, feeling refreshed and ready to take on another day at her new job. She showered, got dressed, and headed to work, feeling a sense of purpose and determination. She was excited about her new job and the new challenges that lay ahead. As she arrived at the office, she was greeted by her friendly boss. They were a diverse group of people, each with their own unique skills and talents. Emma felt welcomed and valued by her colleagues, and she looked forward to working closely with them to make them her team. Over the course of the day, Emma settled into her new role. She was challenged by her work, but she found herself enjoying the sense of purpose and achievement that came with it. As she worked, she couldn't help but think about her conversation with Mark the night before. Their love was still fresh and new, yet it felt like it had always been a part of her life. As the day drew to a close, Emma made her way home, eager to see Mark. When she walked through the door, she was greeted by the warmth of their home and the smell of dinner cooking. Mark was standing in the kitchen, a big smile on his face. He had always been good in the kitchen, and Emma couldn't help but feel a twinge of hunger at the sight of the food he had prepared. They sat down at the table, their hands touching under the tablecloth. The food was delicious, and they chatted about their days. They watched a movie. As the credits rolled, they turned off the TV and sat in silence, leaning against each other. Emma felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. She had never felt this way before, and yet it felt so natural, so right. She knew that she had found something special with Mark, something worth fighting for. The next day, Emma woke up early. She took a shower, got dressed and headed to work, feeling ready to take on whatever challenges came her way. Her new job was everything she had hoped for, and more. She was surrounded by intelligent, driven individuals who shared her passion for their work and wanted their team to be the best. As the weeks passed, Emma and Mark's relationship continued to blossom. They spent every free moment together, exploring new restaurants, watching movies, and going on long walks. Their connection was undeniable, and they found themselves looking for baby clothes and colours for the nursery. One day, while they were out shopping, they ran into Mark's old college buddy, Tom. Tom was surprised to see Mark with a girlfriend, and even more shocked when he realised it was Emma. He couldn't help but notice the spark between them, and teased Mark about his newfound love. Emma felt a bit uncomfortable around Tom, but Mark seemed to know just how to handle him. They exchanged small talk and eventually parted ways. As they drove home, Emma couldn't help but bring up Tom's comments. Mark laughed it off, reassuring her that Tom was just jealous of the happiness he had found with her. Over time, Emma and Mark decided to travel. After all, it would be the only chance they would get before the baby arrived. Whilst away, they explored new hobbies and shared their deepest secrets. They made love like never before, their passion burning brightly. One day, as they were walking hand in hand along the beach, they stumbled upon a secluded cove. The water was crystal clear, and the sand warm beneath their feet. They began to undress, their bodies glistening in the sun. They ran into the water, laughing and splashing each other. As they swam, Emma felt a newfound sense of freedom. She had never been much of a swimmer, but Mark's arms were strong and reassuring. He held her close, his lips trailing soft kisses along her neck. She let out a small moan, her body responding to his touch. They lay on the warm sand, their skin glistening in the sun. They watched as seagulls soared overhead, their cries echoing across the water. They talked about their hopes and dreams for the future, their voices soft and intimate. "I can't believe how much our lives have changed in such a short time," Emma said, her eyes shining with wonder. "We've fallen in love, started a family and travelled together. It's like we're living a fairy tale." Mark smiled, his hand tracing soft patterns on her belly. "It's more than that, Em. We've found something truly special, something we never thought we'd find, and we've done it all together." Emma nestled closer to him, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "You make me feel like I can conquer the world." Mark traced a finger along her jawline, his touch sending shivers down her spine. As they lay there, basking in each other's presence, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder at the journey they had been on together. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, passion, fear, and most of all, love. She had never imagined finding someone who made her feel this way, this connected, this alive. Then, as if it were a page turned in a completely different book, Mark rolled over, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "You know, Em," he said softly, his eyes gleaming with affection, "I've been thinking a lot about us lately." Emma raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Oh?" Mark took a deep breath, his expression serious. "I've been thinking that maybe we should take some time apart." Emma's heart sank. "What? Why?" Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Em. I just think it might be good for us to take a step back, to figure out what we really want. We've been so caught up in this whirlwind of love and passion that we might have lost sight of who we are." Emma sat up, her expression confused. "But we love each other, Mark. I know we do." Mark reached out, taking her hand in his. "I know we do, Em. That's why I think we need to take some time apart. We need to figure out if this love we have is just a passing infatuation or something more. We need to find ourselves again, without each other." Emma felt her heart breaking. "But Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't want to be apart from you. I thought we were meant to be together forever." Mark squeezed her hand gently. "I know it's hard, Em. Trust me, it is. But I think it's what we need right now. We both deserve to figure out if this is real or just lust. Maybe then we can come back together, stronger and more sure of ourselves." Emma closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady her emotions. She couldn't help but think about Mark's friend's comments that day, and Sarah's warning to Emma. "Okay, Mark," she said finally, opening her eyes to look at him. "I'll do it. I'll take some time to think about us, about who we are without each other. But I want you to know I'm not sure what I'll find." Emma couldn't help but think about Mark's words. She wondered if they were really just lust, or if there was something more to their relationship. She remembered Sarah's warning and felt a pang of guilt. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe she had been too caught up in the whirlwind of love and passion to see things clearly. When they got home, Emma packed her bags. Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. She missed Mark already, even though they had only been apart for a few hours. She wondered if he was feeling the same way. Maybe this was a mistake, she thought. But then she remembered Mark's words about figuring out who they were without each other. Emma decided to spend her time apart exploring new hobbies and interests. She signed up for a single mother class. She also spent time with her friends, catching up on their lives and sharing experiences. Despite her efforts to distract herself, thoughts of Mark constantly filled her mind. She missed him terribly and wondered how he was doing. She couldn't help but think about the passionate moments they shared and wonder if that was all just lust. After a few weeks of being apart, Emma began to feel a sense of clarity. She realized that she had been so consumed by their relationship that she had lost sight of who she was as an individual. She started spending more time with her friends and put Mark on the back burner. One day, as she was scrolling through her social media feed, she came across an old acquaintance, Chris. They had lost touch after college, but seeing his updates made her curious about what he had been up to. They started chatting and soon realized how much they had in common. Chris was kind, patient, and understanding, traits that Emma found herself drawn to. He didn't pressure her about her situation with Mark and was supportive of her journey. They started spending more time together, going on walks and sharing meals. In the week that followed, Emma gave birth to a wonderful baby boy she called Ethan. Mark had been called, but to Emma's disgust, said he couldn't be there for the birth because he was at work and was the only one there, so he couldn't leave. One day, Emma decided to confront Mark about her feelings. She knew it would be difficult, but she also knew that she deserved honesty and clarity. They met at a coffee shop, and as they sat down, Emma took a deep breath. "Mark, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," she began, "and I think it's time for us to talk about our relationship." He looked at her, his expression serious. "Okay, Em, what do you want to talk about?" "Well, for a start, you hardly see your own son. It's not about us anymore. You have a child to support." Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. Emma thought about when Sarah had warned her that we might be caught up in the heat of the moment and not really know each other, let alone have children together. Nevertheless, we now had a child together, and Mark had to grow up. Mark's face reddened, and he looked away. "I'm sorry, Em. I never meant for you to get pregnant." Emma sighed, feeling the weight of his words. "I know you didn't, Mark, but that doesn't change the fact that we have a child together now, and we need to be responsible adults." Mark looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Em. I really am. I just didn't think things through. I'm not the kind of person to have children, but you looked so happy and I was having such a good time with you." Emma just couldn't believe what she was hearing from Mark. She thought that he had changed, but it seemed like he was still the same person she met in the beginning. She took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "I understand, Mark, but we can't go back in time. We have to move forward, and that means you being responsible for our child." Mark nodded, his expression serious. "You're right, Em. I'll do whatever it takes to provide for Ethan and support you both. I just don't know how I'm going to do that." Emma took a deep breath, trying to ignore the nagging voice in the back of her mind that questioned reality. "I appreciate your honesty, but we need to figure out how we're going to move forward. Maybe we could try to co-parent." Mark shook his head, looking down at his hands. "I don't know if that's a good idea, Em. How can we raise him together if we're not even in the same place?" Emma sighed, feeling her heart ache. "I know it's not going to be easy, Mark, but we have a responsibility to our child now, and I think it would be best if we try to work together for his sake." Mark looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and fear. "I want what's best for Ethan too, Em. I just don't know if I'm ready for this. I've never been in a relationship before, let alone a family." Emma, not even believing her own ears, said, "We'll have to figure this out together." "I'll do whatever it takes, Em. I just need some time to adjust," Mark said, looking down at his hands again. "I'm still trying to figure out who I am and how I fit into all of this." Emma said to Mark. Well, it's a little bit late for that. It's simple. You are Ethan's father, a grown man who needs to take responsibility for your own life. Mark looked at Emma, his eyes pleading with her to understand. I know, Em. I just feel so lost sometimes, like I don't know who I am or what I want. Emma took a deep breath, trying to hide her frustration. She knew Mark was going through a tough time, but she also knew that they had a responsibility to their child. Look, Mark, we're going to figure this out together, okay? I'm not going to leave you to figure it out on your own, but we need to start taking steps towards the reality that you are a father. Mark looked up at Emma, his expression softening. I know, Em, and I appreciate that you're willing to help me through this. I promise I'll do my best to be there for Ethan. Emma was sure at that point that the whole relationship with Mark had been lust. She now also understood why his friend Tom was so shocked at Mark having a relationship with me. Mark was just a man that swept women off their feet with his charm, but that was all he was capable of doing, it seemed. As for Sarah, she had been right about Mark. He was not someone that could be relied on to take care of his responsibilities. He was still trying to figure out who he was and what he wanted, while Emma had a child to take care of. Emma knew that she couldn't rely on Mark. He had shown her that he wasn't the man she thought he was. She had to focus on Ethan and her own well-being. She decided to cut all ties with Mark and focus on her own life. Emma started by spending more time with Sarah. They talked about their fears and hopes for the future. Sarah promised to be there for Emma and Ethan no matter what. They also started taking care of themselves, going to the gym, and trying new things. As for Mark, Emma decided to cut all communication with him. She changed her phone number and blocked him on social media. She focused on her job and being a good mother to Ethan. She was glad she joined a support group for single mothers and met other women who were going through similar situations. One day, Emma bumped into Chris at the park while pushing Ethan on the swings. They started talking and discovered they had a lot in common. They both loved spending time outdoors, cooking, and reading. Chris was always patient and understanding, never pressuring Emma about their relationship. As they got to know each other better, Emma realized that Chris was different from Mark. He was maturer, responsible, and had a clear vision of who he wanted to be. One day, while having lunch with Chris, Emma decided to share her thoughts about Mark. She was nervous, unsure how Chris would react to the news of her past relationship, but Chris listened patiently, offering words of understanding and support. It sounds like Mark was more interested in his own needs than yours, Chris said, his voice gentle. It's good that you're taking care of yourself and Ethan now. Emma smiled gratefully at Chris. You're right, she replied. I was so caught up in the excitement of the relationship that I forgot to pay attention to the signs. As they continued their conversation, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. She realized that she didn't have to explain herself to Chris, nor did she need to justify her past choices. He accepted her for who she was, flaws and all. I'm glad you understand, Emma said, taking a sip of her coffee. I know it's not easy to wrap your head around, but Mark and I just weren't meant to be. Chris nodded in agreement. I can see that now, he said, reaching out to gently squeeze her hand. You deserve so much better than what Mark gave you. Emma smiled gratefully at his words. Thank you, Chris, she replied. I really appreciate your understanding. As they finished their lunch, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. She realized that she had made the right decision in cutting ties with Mark. He was not the man she thought he was, and she deserved better. Thank you for staying with us and listening to our story. I enjoyed writing a love story. It would be great if you could like and subscribe to the channel, and also give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Have an enjoyable and enlightening time, and we hope to see you again.